One particular challenge for composers is how to develop their pieces, particularly thinking about harmony and modulation. So this short video is all about that. This is a big topic and one which can get very complicated. We're going to look at something called modulation, which can be something you'd only really get to grips with in A-level music or beyond. So this won't be for everyone, and it's certainly not something you need to master in order to start making music. I'm going to build up the idea bit by bit, so when you've got hold of something you might want to try, you can break off and give that a go. You might want to come back to deepen your understanding, and then you'll be able to do more. So when a piece of music changes key, it's called modulation. Modulation can make a piece of music more interesting because it can shift the mood and provide contrast for the listener. Even if you've not heard the word modulation before, you'll definitely have noticed it in songs you've heard all your life. You're simply the best. Okay, so this song is a pop song that you may know, made famous by Tina Turner, called Simply the Best. It starts off in the home key of F. And it goes through a few verses and choruses, but then modulates to a new home key of G. So going back to the beginning, we're in F. We hear a few choruses and verses in that key. And then after a while, we get into a section of the song called the middle eight. Again, using chords that are still in that home key of F. Sounds like this. And we have a couple more chords. And now we're in the new home key of G. We have a couple more choruses. G is our new home. We've modulated. Now in a song like that, the change can be really simple and quite obvious. Have a listen to this extract from the second movement of Brahms's Clarinet Quintet. This is a more complicated modulation. In this extract, Brahms moves from the key of B major to B minor. Have a think, what happens to the mood of the music through this modulation? Agatha, can you tell us about the effect you feel this has on the mood of the music?
So Brahms does a very clever thing in this bit where he takes the bright key of B major and uses a couple of notes from the theme, and he sort of almost shifts them lower and lower until we get to a much darker place. So with each shift, you almost feel like the clouds are closing in, and we end up in this darker, much more moody key of B minor.
But just because you're writing for Clarinet Quintet doesn't mean you have to approach modulation in the same way as Brahms. And at heart, Brahms was doing just the same thing as Tina Turner. So let's remind ourselves what we mean by a key. If we say a passage of music is in a certain key, for example, C major, What that means is that the composer is using notes primarily from that scale. So in a C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then the next C up, and so on. So if the key is in C major, that's the notes the composer is primarily using for that section of music. Now, modulation is when we move from one key to another key. For example, in the Tina Turner, we started in F and then we moved to a new key, which was G. In the Brahms, we started off in B major, but we modulated to a new key, B minor. Okay, so how do we modulate then? Well, first of all, it's common to modulate within a piece of music from a home key to one of its 5 most closely related keys. Now, keys that are closely related share a lot of the same notes, helping the modulation between the two keys seem smooth. When composers modulate to unrelated keys, their new key won't share so many notes with the previous one. And this means that if the modulation happens quickly, it can seem sudden and jarring, which some composers use deliberately to great effect too. To help identify whether keys are closely related or not, composers often use a diagram called the circle of fifths. Take a look at this. Okay, so let's imagine we've got a piece of music and we're in the key of C major and we want to modulate to a different key. And we need to work out what are the 5 closely related keys to C major. And as you can see, the 5 keys that are next to C major are F, D minor, A minor, E minor, and then G. They're the ones closest to C major. They are the closely related keys we can modulate to. Now, before you start this whole process of modulation, it's important you know where you're modulating to and why. Why are you going to a new key? What feeling or mood do you want to create by going there? For example, if you're in a major key to begin with, like before we were in C major, but want your music to shift to a more sad, reflective or somber feeling, you'd probably modulate to a minor key. So thinking back to our circle of fifths, we're in C major. Out of the 5 closely related keys that are in a minor key, I could either go to D minor, to A minor, or to E minor. So for this next example, I'm going to demonstrate modulating from C major to E minor. Now I've decided which new key I'm modulating from and to, my next step is to work out if there are any sharps or flats in either of those keys, and then write down each note of the scale for both of those keys too. Now I'm going to turn each of these notes from both scales into triads. That's chords made up of 3 notes. You have your bottom note, for example C, miss 1, D, play the next, E, miss 1, F, play the next, G. And if you want some more information on triads, have a look at the link in the video. Write the triads down in your table like this. And see if you can identify the same triads that are in both the old and the new key. Now we have all the knowledge and ingredients in order to do the modulation. So now we need to pick what's called a pivot chord. This is a chord that's shared by both the old and the new key. This pivot chord could be C major, C, E, G, E minor, E, G, B, G major, G, B, D, or A minor, A, C, E. Okay, so as a reminder, I'm modulating from C major to E minor. A minor, made up of A, C, E, That is one of the chords that's shared between my old key, C major, and my new key, E minor. And I've decided that this will be my pivot chord. It's called a pivot chord because we're going to use this chord to pivot from one key to the next. As well as a pivot chord, we also need what's called a modulating chord. The modulating chord must contain a note which is not in the old key. And the reason why is because this cancels out the sound world of the old key and introduces the new one. So, can you work out from this table again which chords I could use for my modulating chord, remembering that it must contain a note which isn't in the old key, C major? Hopefully you worked out that the chords I could use for my modulating chord taken from the new key are either an F sharp diminished chord, which contains an F sharp, an A and a C, or I could use a B minor chord containing the notes B, D and F sharp, or I could use a D major chord which uses the notes D, F sharp and A. So, to recap, my original key is C major and I'm going to play a C major chord. Then to modulate, I'm going to need my pivot chord, which is A minor. Then I need my modulating chord, which is B minor. I've now modulated. I can use chords from the new key. My new home, which is E minor, and the mood of the music will have totally changed. Let's take a listen to that again. C major, A minor, pivot chord, B minor, my modulating chord, new home, E minor. As always, composing in music is about experimenting too, seeing what works out for you. This has been some theory to help you during that process, but don't feel like you have to follow it like a recipe. But it might help you find a sound that you love. Good luck, and we can't wait to hear what you produce.